Hey, it's Justin Harvey. Thanks for tuning into the Anesthesia and Pain Management Success podcast. With APM Success, we take a close look at important topics pertaining to business, practice management, personal finance, and careers for anesthesiologists and pain management physicians. We work hard to take your critical questions straight to the experts. Thanks for listening. Hello and welcome to episode 174. I'm very pleased to be joined today by our special guest, Dr. Yury Rapoport. Dr. Rapoport is an anesthesiologist in Boston. He's a medical director for the PACU and ambulatory surgery at Beth Israel Lahey Health in Boston. Dr. Rapoport, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Justin. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So your journey is a really interesting one. We first bonded over talking about locums, and then we've talked a little bit about financial literacy and just career decision-making and lots of, frankly, my favorite topics, being the nerd that I am. So I would love to, for starters, why don't you just tell us a little bit of your story and what brings us to this conversation?
Sure. Let me compress 12 years of a path into a couple sentences. So I'm originally from Moscow, Russia, born and raised, went to medical school there. Towards the end of my medical school, I started thinking of maybe just exploring other countries in terms of continuing my medical training and residency training. Spent some time in Europe, lived in Germany for a little bit. And then came to the US, had some friends in Texas who showed me around, showed me the medical scenery, and I really loved it. I really loved how everything was organized. It was back in 2009, I think, something like that. It was a rookie medical student, basically didn't know much, and I was really impressed. And I figured that that's something I'd be interested in to continue my medical career. So here I am.
I'm curious, I spent a little time in Texas. I have a brother in Austin. Having been to Texas from Philadelphia, I experienced, it was like cultural immersion to some extent, especially being in West Texas and all of that. I'm curious what your experience was coming from Moscow and what were you in Houston at the time?
No, I was in Dallas, which
Okay.
it's pretty similar, but yeah, it was the first place that I visited in the United States. So
Okay.
coming from Moscow, which just to give you a good perspective, it's like New York, but just a little less condensed, but also like very very much of a city vibe.
Mm-hmm.
Very vibrant back in the day. Busy city, and then I come to Texas, which is a little slower, a little more spread out, a little kind of a whole different vibe. So it was a little bit of a cultural experience in the beginning.
A little
I mean,
less snow in Dallas too.
right, and the weather and the heat, and good thing I came. Well, first time I visited was actually in August, so that was a little shocking how hot it was. But when I moved, it was actually December, so that was more of a pleasant surprise with like sort of nicer weather, no snow, no cold weather that I'm used to. So that was definitely a plus.
Yeah, the first time I was in Texas was in August as well, so that definitely left a dent in the psyche for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Talk a little bit about matching into an anesthesia residency coming from a medical school in Moscow. What is that process like?
That was quite a process, to be honest with you. And anesthesia wasn't my sort of intention initially. So just to give you a sort of short perspective, so my dad is a urologist. He's still practicing back in Russia, and I was growing up just kind of watching him, doing surgeries and stories and telling stories. So it was kind of running in my veins, sort of the speciality. I was always convinced that that's what I want to do without, even before I went to med school and actually knew the details about it. So that's the mentality and mindset that I came with to Texas. And I first started doing research for the Department of Urology at UT Southwestern in Dallas. So that was sort of my intention to go for something surgical, urology in particular. But little did I know, when I just arrived, I arrived on a research student visa that they granted me so I could volunteer and do research. That was my sort of launching pad. But little did I know about how, competitive different specialties are, how to get into residency. I didn't do any homework. I was like, my approach was like, I'm just gonna figure it out as we go and see what the whole process is all about. So I aimed to go to urology in 3 4 years after I first arrived, when I was finally all set and got all my USMLE situation figured out and got some research and letters and ready to go. It was a very tough match for urology. It was usually competitive, but for IMG, especially that year, was extremely tough. So even though I got a couple of interviews, I didn't get a position. So, and I guess as it always happens in life, it's just best things happen to you unexpectedly. So, through some weird connections and friends, I met this person who used to be a chairman of anesthesiology department at LSU in New Orleans. So we really got along, and he was willing to help me. So he helped me to get into LSU program anesthesia, and I never thought about doing anesthesia, but it's just like all of a sudden I just thought about it. Why I never considered anything else. This is great.
So I just realized that you come from a medical family that didn't click for me before. So I'm curious, when if you compare notes with your dad about like the scene of practicing medicine, what do doctors in Russia talk about in terms of like the healthcare system? And obviously in the US, we've got these pressures of private practice and reimbursement and like physician burnout, and 110,000 doctors quit last year. And these, I'm curious, like how uniquely American are these problems, and what do doctors in other countries, like what are they thinking about?
I mean, practicing medicine is practicing medicine no matter where you are. There are definitely some differences, and in terms of the way things are done, the way things are organized, I would say the number one difference that kind of makes U.S. healthcare and medicine stand out is the liability part. So that is probably unprecedented, and that kind of like drives the how we practice things, how we do things, how we take care of our patient. For better or for worse, that's probably the number one driver, and the second one's probably the finances and the economy and the cost of things. That is also probably higher than anywhere else in the world. So that makes it a little more unique. But other than that, daily practice, like how you see the patients, how you do surgeries, is pretty much universal across the board.
So when you say liability, you mean like the professional liability of practicing medicine if something goes wrong, getting sued.
Exactly, just the fear of getting sued. That what makes us, do things maybe a little bit differently or a little bit safer, or just somehow shapes the way we practice medicine. So that's
Yeah.
kind of my sort of way I see things, and I believe not only myself, other doctors also think that way.
So another distinction between international medical school grads and the ones in the U.S. is the financial component, especially like going into massive debt to be able to graduate from medical school. And I
Right.
think this shapes a little bit of the financial literacy journey for U.S. physicians. And I know that you and I just briefly spoke about the way that you have sort of been on your own journey of financial literacy. So can you give us a little bit of a sense of like where did you start in terms of the way you think about and how much you know about personal finance and investments and building wealth, and how did that change for you over time?
So there are two sides of this. So basically, yeah, as we spoke, that myself and people like me who come from, I can speak for maybe Eastern Europe, maybe the majority of European schools. So you don't come out with a large amount of debt. In fact, like in Russia and again other Eastern European countries, most of the time the higher education and medical education is free. It's state funded. So with that being said, we come out debt free, and especially one may think it's uh, a big advantage for somebody like me who comes with that education, comes to the U.S. and then comes out of residency, and not we don't have any debt. But at the same time, it comes with a price because we lack education. Like I think average, American graduate, even somebody who grew up here, they have at least some basic understanding of how finances works, how investment works. Maybe not great. Some are obviously better and do their research and homework better, but even growing up, you kind of have this like mentality of how to save, how to like invest, what to do, what are the like things like 401k. Like I came here, I didn't know anything about that. Moreover, I was when I came, I was obviously focusing on the medical part of my career. So I wanted to get into residency. I wanted to become a good physician. I wanted to learn. I wanted to just, be able to practice and dedicate 100% of my time to become a good physician. So I ignored everything else in life, including, financial education. So basically, yes, it's beneficial. You come out debt free, but then you like have no idea what to do with all of this.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder how accurate that is. And obviously, our listeners, there's a little bit of selection bias here. If you're listening to a podcast about investing in careers and all that stuff in your specialty, you're probably ahead of the curve. But I think there's a lot of physician residents and fellows that have about as much context financially as you described you having whenever
There's
you
no curve
started
at
here.
all. It's not about being ahead or beyond. It's there's no curve. When I
Right.
came out, when I was in the final years of residency, it was like I only started sort of capturing some of the knowledge about it, but before that, it was like flat curve.
Yeah. So for all our listeners, if you want to help your residents and fellows, your peers, give the gift of the APM Success podcast this holiday season and help get them up to speed with financial literacy. So you did anesthesia residency in Louisiana. You did a regional fellowship, and then you entered attendinghood. Obviously, that's a big threshold professionally as well as financially. How did you get up to speed in terms of learning about the 401k and the investing and the building wealth and the tax planning and all that stuff?
So I think it's a great question, but I think we're better off just giving a little bit of a background when it'll
Yeah.
happen because that kind of explains a lot. So as we chatted earlier, I was finishing my fellowship training right at the time when COVID happened. So that reshaped everything, life choices, career choices, financial decisions, everything kind of went a different route. So as I was coming from fellowship and was in the middle of COVID, and that actually affected my fellowship training for better or for worse, I reevaluated my career decisions, and instead of uh, committing to the my first job that I already signed for to go after fellowship, um, I decided to just go a little different route and then work a little bit as an attending at the facility where I was trained as a fellow, just to get a little more experience, and then to go and try do some locums, go travel, go explore, because I realized I really don't know much about the difference of different practices. I didn't have any ties to the specific geographical location in the U.S. And I saw all my friends who were working remotely. They were just traveling and enjoying life and working from all those nice places. And that definitely makes you kind of second guess and then rethink your decisions and your established career path. So that's what I
Mhm.
what I did.
S-
Um,
Did you see anything that surprised you, or what most stood out to you when you saw, obviously you come up through academic medicine and you see a certain clinical context there, and then all of a sudden in locums, maybe you saw surgery centers, you saw some private practice. What jumped out at you?
well, I didn't really work in private practices as much as I'm trying to. Well, I covered, a wide area of facilities when I was doing full-time locums, but I don't think it was a private practice. But my fellowship facility was under private anesthesia private group, so that was kind of a good blend of
Hmm.
sort of private group practicing in a large academic, semi-academic community hospital, and also like providing fellowship training. So that was my sort of first encounter with private anesthesia groups. And again, as we were going through COVID, and there were financial difficulties with the group, and I saw them struggling, and that was one of the other things that kind of reshaped my vision. Because initially, I wanted to go private, to work with private group, like traditional mentality, just work as much as you can, become a partner. So kind of traditional sort of anesthesia
Hmm.
pathway. But then I saw all those things happening, and all those financial issues, and that just made me again second guess and just look for different options.
Yeah. As you you compared notes with your other friends who were like jumping into a job after fellowship or after residency. How was their experience during COVID? And did you compare favorably or less favorably, or what was the conversation like?
I think we all were going through a hard time, not only, us fellows or residents, it's just healthcare in general, obviously.
Hmm.
Uh, Other physicians, nurses, everyone was going through a very tough time, especially in the early phases of the pandemic. But I think out of my peers and my co-residents and co-fellows, I'm the only one who just decided to go completely different route and just start my career by doing locums and exploring. So uh, I guess for the most part, it's because I was I didn't have a family at the time, and I was by myself. I was flexible, and most of my colleagues who I was either in training or working, they were mostly like having families and kids, and they needed
Hmm.
some stability regardless. Even though it was uh, this uncertain COVID times, they still just went with the plan and just went for their permanent jobs. And I mean, people are fairly happy. I guess it's what you make of it. It's not, the grass is not greener on the other side.
It's greener where you water it. That's what they
Yep.
say.
Yep.
um, what do you wish you knew? Or is there anything, if, there's a lot of listeners, we talk about locums a fair amount. I think it's a great way to build wealth. If your employment, so the first thing is you got to have an employment agreement that allows for it. If your employer says you can't do anything other than work for us, that's a deal breaker, or that kills it before it's even out of the blocks. But if people are thinking about locums and wondering if it's right for them and wondering about the opportunity, maybe they like the financial upside, they like the 1099 income, they like being able to go to the Virgin Islands or travel around or go to the in the Pacific,
Right.
like Northwest area. We got the mountains in Montana, and I am obviously loving Oregon here. If what types of things do you think people either misunderstand, or what should they know as they're considering locums?
Well, there's tons of information and misinformation. And when I just started doing locums, it was still in the early phases of this becoming trendy. So it was not as crowded. There were
Mm.
few agencies. There was a lot of like information through podcasts and even your podcast. I even there was a lot of information I just gained from podcasts, Facebook groups, just things like you know and it was more of a transparent field. But for example, now, just out of curiosity, I was doing a presentation about locums at ASA, and I just out of curiosity Googled like locum agencies, and there's like hundreds and hundreds of different agencies. Everyone is offering something. So now I feel like for somebody who's like starting to do it right now, they have to be very careful. It's a very crowded field, and there are a lot of
Mhm.
people who may take advantage of you. So my number one recommendation is do your due diligence. And this time around, unlike my early phase of my career when I just came to the United States, when I didn't know anything, this time I actually decided to do my homework and do all the research. And at least that helped me a lot. Like even we're talking about basic things like legal, like taxes, like how to set up an entity, what's a better entity to do 1099 work under,
Mhm.
uh, how to deal with those agencies, or should you just go by yourself and reach out to the hospitals. And yeah, that really helped. And as we chatted earlier, I started off at a very stable, very transparent facility, which didn't offer the greatest rate. But at that point, I figured I just need something stable just to kind of like get a taste of it, kind of get familiar with it, kind of make sure I'm confident with my skills, since I was still in the early phases of my career. So that's probably my number one recommendation to anybody who's considering doing locums. Locums, just don't chase the higher rate, or don't go for the money initially. Just kind of like test it out. Go to a more established and up and running facility, as opposed to something that just lost their anesthesia group and they're trying to scramble and just fill the ORs.
Yeah. Imagine stepping into that clinical environment. It's giving me anxiety.
Yeah.
I can only imagine. And that happens all the time, by the way. Like that's one of the ways that these big groups can quickly, if there's a group with 30 anesthesiologists and they lose a contract, like there's not a lot of groups out there that can just have 30 physicians show up and start doing anesthesia care the next day. It's a lot of locums is how they sort of fill those gaps. And so some of those locums opportunities are these like takeover or what we call RFP, request for proposal, where hospital puts out this request for proposal and company ABC says, hey, we can do it for 15% less than you're paying now. And then that company sends in a bunch of locums docs, and that, it is what it is. It's part of how the world works right now, for better or for worse. And if you're one of those locums physicians, understanding what you're getting into, all of a sudden now you're talking to a bunch of surgeons who are all freaked out because the doctors that they used to work with aren't there anymore. And, there's so much staffing turnover that it does create some inherent challenges.
100%. It's interesting times, especially in regards of anesthesia. I feel like we're just going through some major reshaping of how uh, healthcare in general and anesthesia in particular will be practiced, and
Yeah.
and even the business side of it, how we going to get reimbursed. So it's a major shift, and that's what you're not taught that in residency or medical school, and just especially looking for your first job. People sometimes don't have enough knowledge about what are the different options, what to look for, and what the industry is going through right now.
Yeah.
So definitely cannot overstate that. Just do your homework and learn early. That's the question.
Yes. So you did locums for a while, and now you're kind of back in. You're doing academics. You're teaching. You're overseeing some, initiatives. Uh, talk to us about your current role.
Sure. So I did locums for about about a year and a half, and it was great time. I maybe some people have bad experience with it. I was lucky enough. I never had a bad experience. I worked at different assignments, different geographical areas, pretty much all over Northeast, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut. And I was lucky enough to just be at good facilities where, I was treated well. I was able to, I was working a lot, so it was lucrative financially. But after about a year of doing this, I was a little bit tired. I was a little bit tired of traveling, of uncertainty, even though I could afford it since I was still, like no family, no kids to take care of. I could afford like not being paid for a couple of weeks if something like falls through. I just was tired of this nomad life.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, I was tired for kind of not. I love taking care of patient, and I love the clinical aspect of anesthesia. But then I was starting to think like, okay, is this what my career gonna be all about? Like, I wanna teach. I wanna like maybe get involved administratively. I wanna just learn how to how to manage practice, like different aspects of it. Like maybe I
Mm-hmm.
want to do some research. So I was just, for the lack of a better term, getting bored. So and at that point, I heard about this opening here in Boston, and I knew some people here who were actually speaking highly about this job, and they were going through some transition and changes and anesthesia staffing models. So it was a very good time to come check it out and eventually join them. So this felt like a really good fit because I got an opportunity just not to only practice clinically, but also get to do all those things. It's a residency program. I work a lot with residents. I work with nurse anesthetists, with student nurse anesthetists. I got some leadership role that I'm now very involved in. I'm trying to build some sort of new ways of taking care of patients in PACU. So like turning into like a mini OR where small procedures, dressing changes could be done by anesthesia without utilizing operating rooms. So
Hmm.
there's some projects, and that's what interests me. But at the same time, I'm still like you know doing locums here and there during my vacation, during my post school days. I still maintain that skill of how to like find different facilities they need coverage, that they need some help, and I still enjoy this, like to come and help some rural place that cannot serve their patient population because they can't really hire full-time staff. So I really enjoy that part, like just to help people um, and also just supplement my income as well.
Hmm. One of the things you mentioned I thought was interesting, and I've observed this too. This is an interesting phenomenon, and it's very different from like the business world from whence I come. The sort of the career trajectory, and I guess maybe in academics this is a little different, but there are times at which you come out of training, and especially if you're paid on straight production, like the more you work, the more you make, and that's your reality. And then the like, well, where do I go from here? Sort of question gets posed, either externally or internally, and and then it's a, well, I'm trading time for dollars, and I only have so many minutes in a day, and if I want more dollars, it's more minutes. And then there's this I guess question career wise, or you could even call it like an existential crisis of where does growth come from once you're already giving all your time to make as much money as you think you want or need. So can you talk a little bit about sort of the way that you walked through that, and you talked about like short-term immediate gratification versus long-term goals, and holding these things kind of in tension as you're going through these different phases of your career?
Right. So yeah, exactly. That sort of early onset of existential crisis, for the lack of a better term, that's what probably happened to me after about a year doing locums, and obviously, living in this COVID time, everything is expedited, and this fast pace of changing environment, and like this unstable world that we're living in right now. So it made me think a lot. So what's next? The problem with anesthesia, it's a great specialty. It allows you to do different things and take care of sick patients, and just be there during the most vulnerable times of their life, and actually it's how you do what matters, do what's appreciated. But also from the career standpoint, the problem what that I thought was going through my head is, like, again, what's next exactly? So I'm out of residency. I've done a fellowship. I'm pretty good at what I do. I got my skills. I got some experience now. I'm like, about 2 years out of practice. That's probably I'm on top of my performance. So where do I go from here? How can I make myself better? How can I improve? How can I continue to develop? Because I think once you kind of stop developing and challenging yourself, that's it. It's like you not progressing anymore. And that hit me really hard. And I was thinking, what are my options? Maybe I should come back, do a chronic pain fellowship, and just add another skill, and I can
Hmm.
scale, from that. And some of my friends actually who are chronic pain trained, were advocating, and were really pushing me to consider this
Hmm.
option. Or I was like, maybe I should go do an online MBA, and also kind of like work my way up in the leadership role. So those were the things that were going through my head. So, and um, do I have a one fit all answer how to, like, how one should tackle those thoughts? No, but I think I found those little things that kind of keep me going, and help me stay afloat and still enjoy my career and my life.
Hmm. Talk a little bit about transitioning from locums to the current role, and some of the projects you undertook, and some of the problems that you were trying to solve. What is it that, like, from a problem solving standpoint, what drew you to your current role, and what types of things are you working on? You mentioned the like procedures in the PACU.
Right. So that's my pretty much first major leadership role that I was assigned. Um, when I was in fellowship, and immediately after, I was sort of involved in regional anesthesia education for the residents and fellows in CRNA. It was a mini leadership role, but this is the kind of the first actual, like, big leadership task that I got, and I got really excited about this, because there's a lot of to me there was a lot of potential,
Hmm.
a lot of potential of kind of how to improve the outcomes, patient care, the turnover in PACU, both from the clinical standpoint and also like, from the efficiency standpoint, from the financial standpoint. So again, we're in the early stages here. I just assumed this role about 2 months ago. So we started this PACU attending daily assignment when there is a designated attending whose only job is to review PACU and make sure all the issues are addressed.
Hmm.
If there is an emergency, it's taken care of, you know, immediately. If there's a issue, if somebody needs a sign out and things like that. So that's the starting point. But I'm actually trying to see if it evolves into anything bigger. Like again, as I mentioned, maybe do mini procedures, many do do more nerve blocks there, do things like ketamine infusion in PACU, do things like dressing changes, anything that requires anesthesia could be done done there. Maybe we can also co-manage critically ill patients that are otherwise would go to ICU, but there's something that we can fix in a relatively short time, so they don't need to go to ICU and occupy the bed, and that's how we can save an ICU bed and sort of again make the hospital more efficient. So those are among the few things that I'm working on. It's been really exciting.
Is there anything that, coming back to is it an academic setting that you're in now?
So it's not an academic center setting. It's functioning as an academic, but it's
Okay.
still a community hospital.
Okay. So coming
So-
back to the, being in one place rather than bouncing around in locums and having a leadership role and having some responsibilities for other people, is there anything that kind of surprised you or that you found most interesting or most challenging about that kind of opportunity?
Well, again, part of the reason to do locums, and that's what they're advertised for. It's like no drama, there's no politics.
Yeah.
You don't need to be involved into anything. You just come to your job. It's you and the patient, and this is great. And for some people, I think that's a really good fit. I totally understand. A lot of people don't want to deal with this, and this is fine. But again, for me, I just felt like I just needed a little more challenge and
Mhm.
kind of just to keep me motivated, just to kind of like be motivated to go to work. Not that I dislike taking care of patients, which I love, but I just need this little extra kick, little extra push, something just that will like challenge me. So and I definitely got this. As far as politics, yes, there is politics. There's a lot of things that are there are downsides. There are like you as a full-time employee, you're involved in a lot of like back and forth and bureaucracy and
Mhm.
that. But I mean, you can't have it all. It's
Yeah.
just a matter of what you're willing to accept and what are your like priorities and what you're willing to give up for it.
Mhm. Are there any specific moments or anecdotes or patient encounters or talking to some of the staff or your faculty colleagues that you recall that you were like, this is kind of what I was looking for when I decided to pivot out of locums and into a more fixed role with responsibilities that have, I'm going to make up a word, longitudinality, that where you're overseeing the course of a project or overseeing the same group of staff and you have to deal with the politics and the drama and some of those challenges. Are there any snapshots in time that stick in your brain as like, this is part of what I was looking for?
Well, funny that you asked that. I would say so. I moved to Boston. It was the middle of January. So, and as I came to Boston, middle of January, you can imagine it was not the best time to be around. It was blistering cold, all over the place. I mean, I didn't know anybody. And at that point, I'm like, why did I do this to myself? I could be anywhere and keep doing locums and be like in Florida in winter or whatever, the warm place in Texas, and just like take advantage of the geography. I'm like, why did I sign up for this? And especially coming to a new place, you don't know anybody. You're just like a little bit stressed your first couple of weeks. You don't know anything. You're trying not to get in trouble. And yeah, I was not, all those things together. I was like, what have I done? But then at some point, it was just a combination of things. It was like the weather got better, spring
Hmm.
came about, and then I kind of developed relationship with people. It turned out to be a really nice group of people. So I loved, working with residents. They started assigning me lectures and just sort of like educational and wellness um, assignments, just to and I connected with people, and I felt like that's what was a game changer, that I actually like connected with the people I work with. Even though, with locums I had longer assignments. I was at one place like for 6 months, and felt like, you get to know these people, but it was still not the same. Even though they
Yeah.
treated me nicely, I cannot say anything, but it was just, you felt this, that you're an outsider, you don't belong here, you come and go. So that feeling definitely made me think that it was worth it.
Makes a lot of sense. And I got to imagine when you're a locums physician, even if you are somewhere for a year, you're always kind of like, oh, that person is not really one of us. They're not really committed. We don't know how long they're going to be here. Whenever that person comes back from maternity leave that they're replacing, or whenever we finally find the full time, whatever, then that person's going to be gone. And there can be like a reticence to, like,
Right.
people don't want to invest emotionally in someone who's not going to be around. I can see that being a dynamic. Cool.
But again,
Well, yeah.
don't get me wrong. It was not like they were not treating me right, or I was
Yeah.
like treated differently, or in terms of like, just daily assignments, or breaks, or just like, no, I was treated as, in all of my locum assignment, I was treated as part of the group, as part of the pack. But again, it's just on a kind of subconscious level, some sort of like just a vibe. You could, you're just come and do your job and you leave, and
Yeah.
that's what was, you know less than ideal for me.
So now when you're talking to your residents or fellows, are there any specific like nuggets or pearls that that you try to instill from a career standpoint now that you've kind of seen a lot of different practice settings and you're on your own journey intellectually as well as professionally? What kinds of things do you share with them that are outside of like the clinical
Right.
insight?
No, I mean, I'm again, probably I'm on the edge of getting out of early stages of my career, which probably still early, just a couple of years in practice. But I feel like with my diverse background and all the different places I've been to and different ways of practices I've seen and practiced myself, I gained a little bit of experience, so I can sort of give people a decent advice, or at least an overview of how they want to, plan their career. And I love the whole idea of mentorship. I think
Hmm.
that's one of the greatest things you can do to a trainee, to be their mentor, and not only as a clinician but also as a just sort of life advisor. And that's actually one of the things that we're practicing in Lahey, and that's what I've been telling applicants on the interview, that we try to foster a relationship between an attending and a resident, just throughout the residency, taking them out, just talking about what they're going through, and based on what they're looking for, maybe just giving them the some advice on how to, where to go, what kind of practice they're looking for, what kind of
Hmm.
settings, do locums or do full-time job. Or there's so many ways you can practice anesthesia right now, which is beautiful, and I think it's
Yeah.
going to be more in the future. So, but it's easy to get lost in this. But I do enjoy mentoring and just sharing my experience, and making sure, seeing the people may avoid some of the mistakes that I've done. So that kind of uh makes my heart beat faster.
Yes. Absolutely. Cool. Well, we'll end it there. Dr. Yury Rapoport, thank you very much for joining us today on APM Success.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
If you liked what you heard this week, head on over to apmsuccess.com, where you can find more content and free resources to help you build a successful career in anesthesia and pain management. If you wanted to leave a review in iTunes, I'd also really appreciate it. Thanks for using some of your valuable time to join me today on APM Success.